Once again, it is the Christmas season. The Christmas season is upon us, and we thought there's no better gift than for us to give you episode 125, constituting the 125th consecutive attempt to silence us. That's not going to happen, not during Christmas. So welcome to Game of Crimes. I am the host with the most hair, at least, Morgan here with my partner in crime.
Hey, everybody, it's Murph. Welcome back.
Hola, 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 amigos, players, playerettes, dudettes, everybody in between. Welcome. This is going to be fun. We've got a great episode coming up. But before we get into that episode, just a little bit of housekeeping. Head on over to Apple, Spotify, hit those 5 stars for us. It means a lot. We get a lot of great comments, and it helps with our visibility. And guys, it's the Christmas season. Just give us a review. 5 stars. Like said the lamb to the little shepherd boy. Do you see what I see? I see 5 stars. How about you,
Going
Murph?
Downhill quickly.
I see 5 stars, and I see a whole shitload of pumpkin spice in your future.
Oh, not mine. Now, my wife, she loves that stuff, but not mine.
We went shopping yesterday. Well, I'll tell you more about that later, but I picked up some pumpkin spice. So anyway, also head on over to our website, gameofcrimespodcast.com. That's where we put up information, especially with our guests coming up. We've got yet another book. We'll have some information about his website. So head on over to our website, gameofcrimespodcast.com. Follow us on that thing they call social media at Game of Crimes on Twitter, Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. But I'm telling you, we're kicking it. We're having fun. We're killing it over on Patreon. Patreon.com/Game of Crimes. We just did our review of Black Klansman. Murph has graduated from double secret probation to secret probation. He has almost redeemed himself.
Oh, come on, man.
No. Don't give me this. Come on, man. You screwed the pooch with Miami Vice. You should have been on triple secret probation. It was benevolent of me to cut it down to double secret. So,
y'all help me out here. Send Morgan some hate mail or something. I don't know.
No, send us some positive reviews. For every 5-star review we get, I'm going to consider removing the secret probation from Murph's file, which, by the way, is classified. Nobody gets to see it. So.
We need a lot. We need a lot of reviews, y'all. Help me out.
That's right. Patreon.com/Game of Crimes. So we got 911 coming up. You can't make this shit up. I got some good stories ready for this one. We've got our case of the month. Just monthly Q&A. We've got Q&A already. Sandy Salvato, I'll talk about her, our favorite mafia queen. Already got her questions in. She is an overachiever, so she's got her questions in already for December, as all of you should. So just check us out. Patreon.com/Game of Crimes. And also, hey guys, speaking of Sandy, head on over to our Facebook page, our fan page, Game of Crimes Fans. Just go to Facebook, type it in, and our favorite mafia queen who rules with an iron fist with the velvet glove will determine if you're worthy of interest. And if you're a Seinfeld fan, we'll determine if you're sponge worthy. You'll just need to figure out that reference.
And I don't recognize it, so I'm lost with everybody else.
Seinfeld fans know exactly what I'm talking about. So, but head on over there. But hey, before we get started into this, we have to give everybody has disclaimers, right? So, consult your warranty, all that good stuff. So, but this is a show about crime. We talk about bad people doing bad things and bad people doing bad things to good people. We take the story seriously, but
we don't take ourselves serious at all.
And how do we prove that? How do we give people audible proof? I was going to say visible, but it's a podcast. Audible proof that we don't take this seriously. What do we do?
We have something special that we call
Get ready. Well, no. What time is it? It's time for
Small Town Police Blotter.
Come on, dude. We've done this 125 times. Surely you've learned it by now.
I know what it was. That's what I was saying. Was it time for it? It's time for.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, this is a Christmas themed story that comes to us from Australia, in Carlingford, northwest of Sydney. Population 28,943. Salute. So Murph, this is a heinous crime. This may constitute one of the gravest crimes ever committed in Australia.
Uh-oh. What is it?
Well, guy got his van jacked. 3:30 in the morning, he pulls up to a service station, gets out to fill gas. He has got Christmas-themed items inside of his vehicle. He goes in to use the facilities, pay for his gas, and a woman who's being described as of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander appearance in her early 30s with long black or brown hair, wearing dark clothing and carrying a white handbag. She hopped into the van and drove off.
So he left it running?
No, I think he left the keys in there, though. But in any event, that's not the tragedy. The greater tragedy, it contained 10,000 Christmas-themed Krispy Kreme donuts.
Oh.
10,000.
Oh, that's a major felony.
So the New South Wales police are saying if you have any sweet leads or crispy CCTV footage, donut keep it to yourself.
That's like every cop in the world right now has a tear in their eye.
Oh man! Well, they did. They did replace the 10,000 donuts, which are handmade fresh daily. Of course, they had to get that in there at their intended destinations. We're happy to advise that customers who are intending to purchase, who had already orders placed, will get their donuts as stock has already been replaced. So,
and the poor driver, is he looking for a job?
I don't know, but I'll tell you what: there's no greater tragedy than watching 10,000 donuts drive off. Oh my God!
Oh, that just does. Oh, it makes you want to cry.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know how there are whodunits?
Yep.
Well, this is a moodunit.
Moodunit. Okay.
Comes to us from West Bridgewater. I've got 4 quick stories, just small town police blotters. West Bridgewater, Connecticut, population 7,707. Salute. Right? So they get a call. People are, apparently there were a ruckus going out on one of the ball fields. So police department shows up. Officer shines a flashlight and he catches in the act 3 head of cattle out on the field.
What were they doing?
I don't know, but they said, nothing to see here, officer. Just move along.
We're on our way to Chick-fil-A.
On our way to Chick-fil-A, that's right, yeah. Hey, another one quick. This one, Bridgewater's a little bit bigger town, but they got a call from a man at a laundromat who reported somebody stole his sneakers from a washing machine. But they did not make a clean escape, though. They were identified, the items were returned to the rightful owner, and charges were filed.
Very good. Now, where's the catch in this one?
There's not. That's just it. Gets a washing machine, sneakers, they made a clean escape, clean getaway.
That was it.
That was it. All right. And I'll tell you what.
I'm sorry, folks. He'll be here all week. Don't try the veal.
Don't try the veal. Wareham, Connecticut, population 23,303. Salute. You always wanted to get one of these calls, Murph. I know you did. You wanted to get the report of a loose rat. 1 Adam 12, 1 Adam 12 respond to a report of a loose rat. However, though, it just wasn't a loose rat. When the officer cleared the scene, he said, provided a larger trap to the homeowner. That was one big rat.
Damn. I don't think I'd want that call.
And our final little small town police blotter, this happened actually November 6th at 2:13 in the morning. Bridgewater police received a 911 call from a woman screaming over the phone. She was on her smartphone, so they had to ping her. They had to find her along a location along Main Street. Officers were dispatched and reported the woman had every reason to yell. You know why she was yelling and screaming?
What's that?
She was giving birth.
Oh, damn.
One of the officers reported, "We got a baby here."
I might have been screaming down there with her. Call ambulance, call ambulance. Somebody call 199.
Mother and child, though, were taken to a hospital for follow-up care. Everybody is doing fine.
Somebody call 199. Get some help out here.
Yeah, you damn right I'm screaming. Get your ass out here.
Oh, man.
Hey, well, let's speaking of screaming, there was no screaming involved with our next guest, but you know what though? This is fun. This comes to us from our buddy Jim Lawler, who we had on. We had him on a previous episode. Jim, former CIA case officer, operations officer, not agent. We discussed why you don't say agent; it's officer. Yep. And Jim referred us into this next gentleman, and this next gentleman is very interesting. You might have heard about him. His name is Jack Barsky, wrote a book called Deep Undercover, My Secret Life and Tangled Allegiances as a KGB Spy in America. This guy was what they referred to in the business as an illegal. So he was an illegal resident. Now, he was from East Germany, but he ended up working for KGB, comrade. And I wonder if he knew Boris Badenov, and Natasha. What do you think?
Natasha. Don't care about Boris.
You know what?
I got to tell you, I never dreamt any time in my life that we would get to interview a former KGB agent. I mean, this is one, this is monumental. You might say, what's this got to do with law enforcement? Well, what he did was illegal, and you'll find out how our brothers in the FBI caught him.
And he was committing espionage against the United States. And the other thing you're going to find out too, he's got potentially a tie-in to one of the biggest traitors ever in U.S. history. And you have to find out about that. But this is a guy who adopted multiple identities in order to get to the United States. And like he says, he's got a tangled allegiances, a secret life, but he did eventually join Team America.
Yeah, and it's I tell you what, Jack, it was an honor having you on here, even though you were, against us to start with. Once you got here, you realized how good the United States is and how screwed up socialism and communism is. Now he's a Christian brother, and I was just, I hate to say in awe. I wasn't in awe, but I just never dreamt we'd get an opportunity like this. So this is a really, really special interview we've done today.
Yeah, he's got a website, jackbarsky.com, Barsky, jackbarsky.com. His book is Deep Undercover, My Life and Secret Life and Tangled Allegiances as a KGB Spy in America. But Murph, we can't hear about this. We won't never find out about it unless I ask you, are you ready to play the biggest, baddest, most dangerous, and believe it or not, biggest game of all? Espionage is one of the biggest game of all. It's the game of crimes. Are you ready to play this?
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, you really do have to get in, sit down, shut up, and hold on for this one. This is a once in a lifetime. Let's listen to Jack Barsky.
Everybody, we call this Game of Crimes, and there is no bigger game sometimes than a game, and it's the game of espionage. We go back to the Cold War, spy versus spy, the United States versus the Soviet Union, and there's nobody better suited to talk about this than somebody who lived that life for years. We're going to get into this. So we got this intro again too, Murph, I believe, from a mutual friend, did we not?
We did, from former CIA, not agent, but ops officer, Jim Lawler. So, Jim, thank you very much for the introduction today to today's guest. And our guest today is Mr. Jack Barsky. Now, that's the name he goes by now. I don't think that was your original name, was it, Jack?
No, the name I was born with is very German, and I hate to repeat it because then Americans like to imitate, and it doesn't work.
You don't have to say anything on here you're not comfortable with saying.
I remember watching a clip of you. I think it was Mike Wallace, I believe, was interviewing you on 60 Minutes, and he kind of had to pry out your name from you. It's kind of like, what was your name?
Well, no, that was Steve Croft, and
Steve Croft. Yeah.
That was the first ever question that I was asked in the media. And it was like, it was a very interesting, we immediately went off script, and that was funny.
Well, Jack, as we go by, go ahead, Steve.
The fact that you're saying anything associated with your past life is funny, that just tells me you got a good sense of humor.
Well, hey, Jack, like you said when we got started, I know you've done hundreds of interviews. We don't want to dive into just the usual stuff, but we do want to just kind of let's set a little bit of context, because to get to where you are today, you had to start somewhere. So just kind of let everybody just kind of give us a recap. But where did you grow up originally, and under what conditions?
Okay, so born in 1949. That was 4 years after the end of World War II. And grew up in East Germany. Initially, it was the Soviet-occupied zone of Germany, and that became the German Democratic Republic. The only true word among those three is German. It was neither.
I notice all of these dictator nations, like the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea. It's never democratic, right?
Right. So, grew up in the country, which was actually a blessing because the cities were like demolished. A lot of them. There are pictures like that blow your mind. And there was hunger, and there was homelessness and all that. I did not experience any of that. I can't remember ever having been hungry as a child.
How far away from Berlin were you? Obviously they divided up East and West Berlin when they dropped the wall, but where you were living in Germany, which became East Germany, where were you living?
I was south east of Berlin, about maybe 70 miles or so, and right on the border with Poland. So and it was a very, very poor section of Germany, traditionally poor soil, almost no industry, no institutions of higher learning. Uh, but nevertheless, both my parents were teachers, and so they paid a lot of attention to my education, and the school system was pretty darn good.
Hmm.
This is one thing that the communist rulers paid a lot of attention to educate the new leaders of the nation, and of course also brainwash us in a big way.
Yeah, I was going to say educate and indoctrinate, because once they've got you in the classroom,
Yeah.
they can do those things. When was the first time, as growing up, you realized that things were different in other places like West Germany or the United States, other places? When did you first realize that, hey, I'm under a communist rule here? It's now East German. It's East Germany.
There, that's a good question because it depends upon what level of realization. And I started realizing that some things were better in the West when I listened to West German radio because their music was so much better. And when the Beatles first came out, this was I was, I think, 12, 13 years old. Beatles and the Rolling Stones and the Beat Revolution. I mean, the East German pop music was horrendous. Nobody listened to it. So, but other than that, because I didn't have my family didn't have relatives in the West. There was no West German television in my house, so I only knew the one thing about the music and some, whispering here and there, that they have bananas all year round in West Germany. But I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to that even throughout high school, because whatever was good, quote unquote, in the West was countered by the fact that we knew that in West Germany there were Nazis in the government, ex-Nazis, which is actually historically true.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that we were taught in school that the world was going towards communism. The third world was more and more aligned with the Soviet Union, and the reason that the United States and West Germany were much better off as far as standard of living is because they they robbed the wealth from the third world. So not a whole lot of thinking about that. The first time I really noticed a difference was when I was in Berlin for a 3-week sort of practice trip. That was just at the very visit when I was actually invited officially to join the KGB. I had a trip to West Berlin. Okay, just to see if I can handle this, to be on the other side of the wall. And I emerged from the subway and I looked around and I said, "Wow, this is a movie that's in color." Because where I came from, it was all in black and white and brown.
It was like gray, right? No, because I was going to ask you, when you were growing up, so if you were born in 49, around the time that you would have been 12 or 13 years old, that's when the Berlin Wall came down, in August of that year.
Indeed, 1961. And by coincidence, uh, when when they started erecting the wall, my parents and my dad had a car actually, and we had just spent a couple of weeks on the Baltic Sea for a summer vacation, and we were going to visit Berlin. And actually, in those days, you could go to West Berlin and maybe buy some stuff that we couldn't get in the East. And as we are driving down the autobahn, all of a sudden there was military, and they wouldn't let us go. So what's going on? We're not telling you. You can't just get in. So that was the very first day of when they were starting to build that wall, and we couldn't find out until obviously in those days there was no car radios until we got home and turned the TV on. Okay, so the East German government erected the anti-fascist protection wall, or whatever the right translation was. It was just to make sure that we wouldn't be invaded by the evil Nazis from the West, when indeed it was to make sure that the flight of East Germans, particularly highly educated East Germans, to the West would be stopped.
Did
Yeah,
your
I think the clue in that is when you've got East Germans trying to escape to the West side and they get shot. That might be
Yeah, but I didn't know that. That wasn't, listen, when we listen to West German radio stations, the moment they started talking, we turned it off.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was no, I'm a fundamentally super curious person, but somehow, because I was doing well in high school and then even better in college, I sort of rose instinctively to what was the East German elite,
Mm-hmm.
and I had no reason to doubt what they were telling us. And I had, that there was just no other opinion around me. And the folks, particularly in college, we had some students in, maybe a handful of students who were sort of dissidents, but they weren't really good students.
Mm-hmm.
So they were isolated, and nobody listened to them. So it was the brainwashing was perfect. Okay, so but by the time I said yes to the KGB, I was 100% convinced that I was on the right side of history, and I was going to do the right thing to liberate all the suppressed nations and individuals in the world, and help erect the communist paradise on earth. And oh, by the way, just to add that in, Marxism Leninism was taught to us as if it were a science. We were taught that Marx discovered the science that dictates the evolution of mankind, and of the man, and how that there was a clear line from starting with slavery, then with the Middle Ages, the what's that called, when you had the kings and the queens and the peasants. Feudalism,
feudalism,
and then capitalism, and eventually
communism?
communism. And we were told this was just as scientific as physics. And again, everybody, everybody said the same thing. By the way, the people that taught us were very, very smart people. They all believed in that nonsense. And we have similar things going on right now in Western society, where very smart people believe in very, very bad, stupid things.
Well, put a pin in that, because that's you actually started bringing up something I want to talk about as we get towards the end, because there's a lot of things going on in the world. But let's circle back for just a minute to your parents, to that first time when you ran into the soldiers and the walls coming down. Do you remember, or did your parents ever have a discussion? Is that maybe we need to go to West Germany? Maybe we need to pack up our stuff and leave? Did that discussion ever happen that you know of?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, my father was a party member, and he had a decent career. We did one move. We moved from a small village to a small town where my dad became the principal of a middle school. The only hint with regard to the West and parents talking about it was my father ruminated as to whether he should put an antenna on the house that we lived in, so we could watch West German television. But he didn't do it because those antennas had to be very powerful, and they were physically large, and that would have killed his career. And that was it. No, us moving to the West. If he ever had a thought like that, or my mother had a thought like that, it was not shared with us. I had a brother and myself. No way.
Well, you grew up on the east side there before the wall, but still east side, and pretty much like you said. I loved it when you said brainwashing, because that's kind of where I was headed on the next comment. But the propaganda and the indoctrination that you had, you really didn't know what was available on the other side of the wall, especially once they built the wall, right? I mean, you didn't know that maybe you guys didn't have the kind of food and as much food, or the entertainment or whatever.
Yeah, there was one hint when, as I said, we didn't have relatives in the West, but somehow, and I don't know, there there was one very very tenuous connection. And one time we got a package for Christmas that had all kinds of stuff in it, food that I'd never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
Cereal. We didn't know what to do with cereal, actually.
Yeah.
Just eat it or put milk on it, or put
Yeah, I
beer
don't
on
know.
it, right?
It didn't come with instructions because everybody in the West knew what to do with it. So,
Wow.
no, there was maybe once or twice, and there were, I think, bananas and oranges in it. And, I didn't really care. The oranges tasted good. I didn't like bananas. And we had some really decent fruits coming out of a garden. My parents grew strawberries and other kinds of berries, and there were grapes and apples and pears. So during the summer and the fall, we had some pretty decent food.
Mm-hmm.
And the lack of meat over time. Initially, there wasn't a whole lot of meat available. Maybe on Sunday, or you had to have your own chickens and rabbits and so forth. Uh, uh, none of that really mattered, because there was nobody that we knew who had it better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I'm
It's
saying.
just
Your
what you knew.
worldview is shaped by what you know, and if you don't know anything else, you think you're at the top of the pyramid, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly right.
I was going to quick question. If I remember, I can't remember where I remember this from. Is there a rabbit dish in German called Hassenpfeffer?
Yeah, I just don't know. That is this was a word I'm familiar with, but we didn't use it, so I don't know what that means. It's
No, it's okay. It was just more one of the things. Hey, but the other thing too, I want to talk about kind of as you're starting your formative years, and you talk about eventually you came on the radar of KGB. And I want to point out too, folks, you can go to his site, jackbarsky.com. He's got a great book. It's called Deep Undercover: My Secret Life and Tangled Allegiances as a KGB Spy in America. This will obviously be on our site. So jackbarsky.com. I wanted to kind of talk about, as you're going through this, there was the KGB, but East Germany, their Ministry of State Security, everybody might remember it as the name is the Stasi. How come you did not come up? I mean, how was it that it allowed you to move towards the KGB as opposed to the Stasi? Why would not the Stasi be interested in you in the same way the KGB was, or did KGB overrule Stasi and to get you?
Well, that's a wild guess. Nobody ever explained that to me. And when I was first approached by somebody who made contact, I thought it was Stasi because the guy was German, but he wasn't. He really wasn't. He was a volunteer for the KGB. That's just indication that the KGB had first dibs, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one stat, if I remember right, at one time, I think there's about 16 or 17 million people in East Germany. And at one time, they thought around between the actual people who worked for Stasi and the informers, there was about 2 million. It's like,
Wow.
I mean, there was just the penetration into society and, by the Stasi. Did you ever I mean, do you recall as you were growing up, kind of, you talked about the volunteer pitching you in a sense. Were you pitched by anybody else before that, like by the Stasi, or was this when this volunteer approached you? Was that the first pitch that you remember or know of?
That was the first pitch I remember, and quite frankly, I don't recall that any friend of mine uh, had disclosed to me that they were working with the Stasi, even though a couple of them were while we were in college as volunteers. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, I just got to throw that in because it's it's delicious. My best friend in college, I mean, we were really, really close, wound up. He became an employee of the Stasi as a chemist, and he wound up eventually as the head of the forgery department. And they were so good that the KGB bought forged passes from the Stasi, and it's a good chance that I was traveling with fake passports that my friend made.
How about that?
And you didn't know at the time that's what he was doing, is what you were
Oh
saying.
no, I did not. No. This is all, the moment I moved to Berlin for my training with the KGB, I pretty much lost all contact with everybody I left behind.
Well,
And that included your immediate family as well, right?
That is correct. Now, I still had some loose contact, but I was already living under a cover story. I told everybody I was starting to work for the foreign ministry in East Berlin.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about now. What was it about your education, your background, that made you think a candidate for KGB? What were they interested in you? And let's talk about now that approach now, because you're in East Germany. You're approached by a volunteer, but for KGB. So let's start talking about that. Let's talk about how you start getting into this life. This working for KGB. So, from what was the pitch like? What was the conversation like that led you to think, "Hey, this is something I want to do"?
Oh, the conversation was like I didn't really take it very seriously. I just when I was approached, it was on a Saturday. I was in my dorm room, and this fellow showed up, and his cover initially was really stupid. It was this guy was the stupidest KGB guy I met in my entire career there, because his cover story was so not credible, because he said he was from the local factory that very very that made sophisticated, high precision optical instruments that actually could be sold to the West. That was that good. And he said that he was working for the company, and he wanted to know what my plans were after I finished my degree. And the idiot should have known that was like impossible, because there was no recruitment going on, and the companies didn't recruit. You were assigned to a job after you graduated. Okay, so I knew immediately. My guess was Stasi, and then eventually he changed his mind, and he changed the tone of the conversation, and he told me, "Oops, son, I've got to admit, I'm really not from that company. I work for the government." And I remember that sentence as if it was spoken yesterday. And I just want to ask you: could you envision for you to one day work for the government? And in my mind, I was thinking, could you tell me what part of the government? But I already knew. So, I was a pretty smart young man.
Well,
So I
speaking
said,
of that, real quick, I want, before we move on, talk about your college education. So, what were you studying? What were you training in? Because that's going to factor in later.
yeah, I studied chemistry, and turned out to be really, really good at it. I rose to the top of a class of 70, and we were all hand selected. We were already elite, as far as high school graduates. And I rose to the very top, and in my junior year, I received a scholarship, which was called the Karl Marx Scholarship, which was restricted to 100 concurrent holders in the entire country.
Wow.
Now that made me a standout, okay? And the recruitment, the first contact came after me receiving that scholarship. And you need to know that in those days, and none of that, I was just playing around. I was doing great. Get good grades. I played basketball on the college team. Life was good, and I didn't really. I just I wasn't very purposeful, so to speak. So when he asked that question, I said yes, but not as a chemist. And he knew he got the answer that he wanted. I I just figured, let's see what it will be interesting. Let's put it this way: there was not even a thought, and I didn't take it seriously. And I tell people in those days, you know, a purposeful life. I didn't know what that meant. I played life. I was very playful for a long time, actually. And oh, by the way, that helped me get through the lonely existence as an undercover illegal.
Yeah.
In your book, you talk about how your ambition at that time was to become a professor of chemistry at the university you attended, right?
Yeah, exactly. And teaching is in my blood. My parents were both teachers, and I learned some subjects that were really difficult by teaching them.
Mm-hmm.
High level math. So I liked teaching. I liked sharing the knowledge that I had with others. Still do.
When you say high level math, does that include counting your fingers and your toes? Because that's what I do.
Murph, if he could count any higher.
Okay, so are you referring to the fact that when I indicate that's 3, I do it different from Americans?
Yeah.
By the way, that's you bring up a very good point too. We'll talk about this too in terms of learning culture and trade, Cav, because that is something between how Germans, or some Europeans do 3 thumb, first finger, second finger, and Americans. Murph's got 3 up like that. Well, that's because that first finger is your pew trigger. It's your booger finger. So you don't want to.
You know what the second one is, right?
Yeah, that one. Hey, you used a term of art. Same thing we did with Jim Lawler. We want to kind of define a term of art because in the CIA, I live in Northern Virginia. There's so many people running around going, yeah, I'm a CIA agent. Well, no, an agent is somebody who spies for the United States. So you used the word illegal. So there were legal residents and illegal residents. Tell us, so in that term of art, explain the difference between being a legal and illegal resident.
Well, legal typically would be on the cover of being a diplomat, so to speak. On the cover story would be a diplomat, and you know what happens if a diplomat is caught spying? They just get kicked out.
P&G, persona non grata, and has to leave the country.
Now, then we have the Knox that operate under their own identity, but they are subject to arrest if they're not careful.
And Knox is non-official cover.
Right. And then there are the illegals, and illegals operate under a different identity altogether. And we were arrogant enough to send me to the United States with a backstory that I was actually born in the U.S. Jack Barsky was a real person who passed away at the age of 11, and we stole that identity. So we were completely unprotected. Illegals were unprotected. If I was caught, initially the attempt would have been made to turn me. That's typical for intelligence work. And if I was not cooperative, I would have wound up in jail and spent quite a few years in jail until maybe the Soviet Union would get me out by, exchanging me for somebody that they, set up and accused of espionage.
Well, there's a tactic that I've seen play out in today's world too. As I'm thinking, Steve, Victor Boot, and Brittany Griner, you've set somebody up.
It just makes me sick to my stomach when we think about it.
Hey, well, Jack, let's talk about the entrance into KGB. So you're pitched by this person. How does that go? How long do you think you were on the radar of them before they made the pitch, or is it because you made that list, the Karl Marx scholarship? Did that put you on the radar?
Just to finish the story of the initial recruitment. So this German invited me for a luncheon at the number 1 restaurant in town, and that is where he introduced me to Herman. And he said, when I got to the table, he pointed to this other fellow, and he said, "I would like to introduce you to Herman. We are working with our Soviet comrades." Now, Herman, that wasn't his real name, and I don't even know if I ever met any KGB agent who gave me their real first name.
Sounds familiar.
I was
Bob, yeah.
So Herman, and as soon as I shook Herman's hand, the German who never introduced himself by name at all disappeared. So I was now with Herman, and Herman and I had an unofficial relationship for 18 months. And we met roughly once a week initially in his vehicle and just talked about stuff, what it might be like to be a spy. Typically, the idea was for me to go to West Germany, and that made a lot of sense because, well, the Stasi had about 1,000 agents in West Germany because, there were no difference in language, no minor differences that could be explained, and there were no cultural issues. So, and the U.S. was not talked about. And he gave me some little tasks to do to see how well I would do, just like reaching out to strangers and befriending them and finding out some stuff about them. And we talked about what it might be like and all of this. And he became like an ersatz father to me. He was about 10 years older than me. And we talked about everything, how are you doing with the girls? I said, I don't know. I'm a little bit shy about this. I still remember that. They want to have a boy the same way you want to have a girl. I was like, okay, and it went on and on and on. And now, in hindsight, I understand that he was studying me as to whether I fit a profile that the KGB had in mind with regard to who would be a good candidate for this job of illegal. And I found out about this profile. There's a fellow who who was the head of the Directorate S illegals in the KGB by the name of Vadim Kirpichenko, who was interviewed after the KGB didn't exist anymore, and he gave a list of character traits that they were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm looking through that list, if you don't mind, I can go pick up a document and read it for you. If not,
Yeah, no. This is the whole purpose. I mean, this is getting behind. This is peeling back the onion, getting behind the covers. Yeah, get that document. Let's talk about it.
It will take like 30 seconds.
Okay.
Well, while he's doing that, Murph, he's getting that document. I mean, think about this. This is the ultimate game of cat and mouse. You've got somebody now from East Germany, thought he was being recruited by East Germany, only to be recruited by KGB. So and think about this: when you were recruiting, he's in his safe there. It looks like his safe room, getting the document. Think about when you were recruiting informants and confidential sources and stuff. You wouldn't spend 18 months doing it. It's almost like, hey guys,
maybe 18 minutes.
18 minutes, and then hey guys, either flip or fly. You're going to be one of those others. Mm-hmm. So Jack, while you're doing that, we're just talking about kind of, in our business and stuff too, especially on the law enforcement side, the thought of spending 18 months recruiting somebody is anathema to the way it works, when you need a case to be made. So just the sheer patience of KGB.
And again, Kirpichenko in this interview said that they scanned hundreds and hundreds of people. And even after they recruited them, that didn't mean that they were deployed. So it's not me saying it. He said that we were the elite of the elite, period. Okay, and here's the list of character traits that they were looking for. Quickness of intellect, high erudition, language abilities, bravery, focus, quick response to fluid situations, hardiness to stress, adaptation to completely new conditions of life. This is my favorite. Well-controlled inclination to adventure, ease of transformation, emotional stability. So, and when I read this, that pretty much described me and still describes me today. They were just looking for people who could operate by themselves, on themselves, and very quickly make the right decisions without the ability to, consult with a handler, so to speak.
So this first meeting with Herman, did that occur after you made the Karl Marx scholarship list you were talking about?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Is that because everybody has sources they look at? What are our funnels we look at? And that's probably was one of theirs, right? When you made a list like that, it's
Well,
like,
just like the CIA, I don't know if they're still doing it, but used to pretty much recruit Ivy League students. The KGB looked for the smart people in good schools for sure.
yeah. So during this 18-month process, what were you doing for work?
Uh, okay, so I was finishing my degree, and for 1 year, I was already an employee of the university. My official title was assistant professor. However, I was paid to be the secretary of the youth organization of the chemistry department. That was a full-time job. There was I did a little bit of teaching, but I was paid to be a functionary, and thank God that the KGB stepped in, because this would have most likely uh, meant that was going to have a career in politics in East Germany. I was already recruited, and I was told, to my next job would be the deputy secretary of the youth organization for the entire university, which would have meant that I would have stepped up to the secretary. And guess what? Where do you go from there? Party, government. Shit, I would have died, because once you're in there, you will find out the lies. Because I met some high school uh, friends of mine who wound up working in the government. Like my first girlfriend wound up working in the state planning commission, and she found out very quickly how the numbers were cooked.
Hmm.
Hey, that's another thing too. As you started getting older, did you start seeing? Did you start kind of seeing behind the curtain, like we say, the Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain? Because I'm thinking of like Russia. The elites get the better apartments, the better cars. They have the Dachaus. They've got their little homes in the in the country. Did you start, as you started getting older and started getting more mature about seeing these things? Did you start seeing that separation between the elites and the ruling class, and then everybody else?
No, because I guess I didn't I guess I didn't want to see it, because I was going to join this elite no matter what, right? So why even start questioning it? Okay, so the ideology was such. We were supposed to be a country that was ruled by the working class, but the working class had to have a representative, and that was the party. And the party was, it was hierarchical, and the central committee and so this was all fine with me. I had no clue about what was going on in East Germany and the Soviet Union until after the wall came down. And I was able to do some research and find out the truth.
Well, let's talk about that. So during that period, what does it finally take, or how does it finally come to fruition to where you make that next step? You go, okay, I'm in. I'm going to be. I'm going to work for KGB.
Yeah, that as I said, there was as part. At one point, Herman told me that there was a 3 week trip to Berlin planned to give me a little more training. And so I met another KGB agent, and he was my handler for the 3 weeks. And he gave me some tasks, and he gave me some West German literature to read and stuff like that. And we talked a little more specifically what it might be like to go as an illegal into West Germany. And on the last day of that 3 week trip, he took me to the headquarters of the Soviet Army in East Berlin, in Karlshorst, and it was the headquarters of the KGB as well. And we both entered an office, and it was a big office with a big desk with a small man behind it, and a bust of Felix Dzerzhinsky, the founder of the KGB. So it was very impressive. But when this small man opened his mouth, he wasn't small anymore. That was a very strong voice with a big psychological footprint. And we did a little bit of small talk. He spoke Russian. I understood enough Russian to figure out that I didn't really care about what he was talking about. The reason why we're going to be spying on the evil West Germans and whoever else we were going to be spying on, and then abruptly he asked that question, which I was not prepared for. So, are you in or not? And I'm thinking, oh shit, it's getting serious now. Mm-hmm. Because up until that point, I had not really thought that one day that question would be asked, and I wasn't prepared for it. So I played for time. I said, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I'm qualified, and I don't know, and I'm not trained." And he said, "Don't worry about it. You are qualified, and we will train you. However, we also work only with people who can make decisions quickly, and I give you until tomorrow noon." That made for a sleepless night. Mm-hmm. And I went back and forth. What
were you weighing? You were talking about going back and forth. How did you approach making that decision? What was your some people write a list on one side, the pros, the cons.
That's exactly what I did with my scientific approach to decision making. And I even assigned sort of numeric priorities, and then I added it all up, and the end result was 50-50.
Now you're now flip a coin, right?
Yeah, and so now this is where your subconscious takes over. There were three factors that made me say yes. Number one, the flattery to be invited by what I knew at the time, the most powerful intelligence organization in the world, being recruited by them. Number two, my adventurous nature. Mm-hmm. I was going to be able to travel to the West, and Germans have something in their DNA. We like to travel. It's called Wanderlust. And I just really wanted to see Western countries. And and lastly, and that is something that nobody figured out about me. I was, and I had an anti-authoritarian streak, a pretty strong anti-authoritarian streak, and I didn't want anybody to tell me what to do. And that's why I almost got kicked out of high school, because I challenged teachers, but I learned to fit in. So, but that streak said, "Yay! I'm going to be outside the law in East Germany. I'm going to be outside the law everywhere I'm going." So you put this all together, and it was a 51-49 decision.
Wow! So, interestingly enough, about that too, you talk about making that decision. Did your 3 weeks in Berlin, was a lot of what was said before, because you were talking about education and indoctrination, because now you're in West Berlin. How was, when you landed there and you started walking around, how big of a difference between East Berlin and West Berlin, or your side, when you were in West Berlin? How did that not tempt you to say, man, I really like life here. Maybe these guys are getting it right and the communists have got it wrong. Did that thought ever creep into your head, or had you been so indoctrinated by that point?
Not even a hint of a thought about that. You got to understand, we were, because at the end of the war, that we knew there was the Marshall Plan that put West Germany back on its feet rather quickly, and we knew that the Soviet Union did what they were allowed to do to take reparations out of East Germany. So we were behind, and we were catching up. Okay, and at that time, the one aspect of the catching up was our athletes. The East German, the Communist Party paid a lot of attention, as you know, included doping, which we didn't know, to develop elite athletes.
I was thinking of that joke of the East German women's swim team that almost looked like guys instead of girls. You talked about doping and steroids. Looking at the Olympics and stuff before they got good at it. Yeah,
exactly. But this was a time when we already had colored television, and East Germany was recognized as a country and had a seat at the United Nations. So I just knew we there was a slogan. Let me see if I can say what we were going to do in our competition with West Germany. Pass West Germany without catching up. Kind of stupid, but we believed it. We believed that we would be better off within 10 years. We would beat the crap out of West Germany. The same way Khrushchev was bragging when he was in the United States. We'll pass you, and I believed in it. So.
So now you're at this 18 months, you make that decision. What happens now? You walk back in there, you say, I'm in. Now, what changes for you? How does your training start now? Where do they take you? What do they do with you?
So first I had to resign from my position at the university, and I had to hand in my party document, the membership book. And I had an official document that said that I was going to be an employee of the State Department in East Germany. And when I met the party secretary and I handed this guy the membership book, he looked at me and said, "All right, I know we'll never really find out, but you're going to do a good job." So he had an idea what was going on. Wow. And so within about a month of that invitation by this short fellow, I moved to Berlin. And this is where I wound up with a suitcase and not a whole lot. Just to pack my suitcase, and my belongings fit all in a suitcase. And I had my first clandestine meeting. I met a fellow. There was a time and a place, and there was a code phrase. And I met my new handler, which by the I have a Nikolai. Okay. So Nikolai took me to a car, and this was my first big surprise, and I handled it really well. He said, "Well, welcome, and we already have a task for you." I says, "Oh, great! This is wonderful. What is it?" He said, "You got to find a place to live." Now, I think I showed no emotional response to that, even though inside I said, "Oh shit, how the heck am I going to do this?" Because all living space in East Germany was controlled by the party, and there was a huge shortage. So for me, as a single person, to find something to live, no apartment would have been available. And I said, "Okay." So I found at the university, I could sleep overnight for a couple of nights in a dorm. And I found myself a place. It was a dump. It was outside of Berlin. It's in a suburb. And I was wandering around there and asking people where I might find a place where I, just could sleep overnight. And eventually I found something, and it was an outhouse, so to speak, not a toilet. It was an outbuilding, concrete, one room with a bed and a chair, no table, and a little room next door where they had running cold water and a stove. That was my home for about 9 months. And I think that made a really good impression on Nikolai. God forbid I can't find anything. Now what? I'm done. I didn't know that. They were testing me.
Well, when you say they were testing you, had you not found a place to live, would that have been it for you, or would they have found something for you?
This is speculation, but based on a real case where I met in Berlin accidentally. I met a classmate of mine and who was a classmate in high school, and he was going to do the same thing for the Stasi, and he didn't pass the second test. The second test was going over to West Berlin and and doing a little bit of work, like knocking on a door and under cover of his story, finding out who lived there and what they were doing, that kind of stuff. He went back to his handlers and he said, "Shit, I can't do this." He never worked as an engineer. He studied engineering. He was done. And I think I would have been done too. So, they were so damn ruthless, even though they were so nice to me. There's no way I could have gone to the university. So I would have wound up someplace on a farm or in a factory or whatever. Eventually, maybe sort of recovered in a period of years. But I had no idea that my life was like I was on a high wire.
Oh yeah,
without even that balancing.
So a friend of mine that was military Navy SEAL, but he used a term one time, and it's exactly yours. He said, "Well, I'm moving. I stabbed the lifeboat." He quit. He had no plan. He was just going to quit and move to California, and that's kind of with you is you stabbed the lifeboat. There was no choice. I mean, I think that's what propels people to do certain things and become creative. You knew in your mind, right? If you did not find a place to live, you were done. So it was just that not only that urgency, but that I don't know. Was it fear too? Fear of
Sorry to disagree. I didn't know. I didn't even pursue this. That thought that I was done. That's in hindsight. But I couldn't fail. Failure was not an option. Never was. That that was instilled in me by my mother. And since I succeeded in everything that I touched through university, I even became a good basketball player, even though I had no talent. But I couldn't fail at anything that was important to me. And there's no way. Failure was not an option.
So you get this stunningly beautiful one room out building with cold running water and a stove. I
Yeah.
can't imagine what that's like. But how does your training go now? What does training look like? Is it because some people have a concept that's like they bring you into a classroom and they train you. What is it like to be trained by the KGB?
First of all, and that might even surprise you, there was no official plan. They may have had one, but they didn't share it with me. There was no like, okay, this month we do surveillance detection, and next month we do that, and we do secret writing. So everything was ad hoc, coming at me ad hoc, and one on one.
And you never met anybody else, no other students, no other agent trainees at that time, right?
I didn't even know that they had other students. It was completely in isolation. And initially, when I was living in that dump, the meetings were in Nikolai's vehicle or in a place where whatever you call these apartments that were secret, right?
Like a
Part of
safe
the
house or
training,
something.
yeah, part of it, yeah, that's what you could call it. Part of that training also required me to take initiative. They told me, okay, you need to expand your knowledge of what's important in life to become a more well-rounded personality, such as read more novels, go to the theater, go to museums, the opera, and that was great because they paid for the stuff. And the last thing was, the first book they gave me to read was the Constitution of West Germany, and they would give me West German magazines to read, and this is where once I had an apartment, they told me, now you got to get yourself a TV set and watch West German television. Uh, Again, already that was like again proof that I was outside of the law because that wasn't allowed. But my initiative was very important as to uh, what to pick there, and the other thing I was told, you must learn another language. There was a rule that everybody who was going to the West had to speak at least two languages. So I had German, and then he allowed me to pick the other language. And since I had absolutely no problem with English in high school, I picked English, and that eventually got me to a point where I'm talking to you today in what is pretty darn good English.
So, what was you said you had a cover story. Is that the same cover story you gave to your family, to your parents to say? Because at some
Initially, yes, yeah, my mother knew that I was gonna be a diplomat, and she was a little bit disappointed because she saw me as a tenured professor in East Germany. Tenured professors, there were not too many at a university. This was the elite and highly respected in the town where I went to college. There were about 100,000 people who lived there, and tenured professors, maybe 20, and I was going to join that elite. She was somewhat disappointed, but I said, listen, I'm going to have a really good career. I'm going to get to travel to other countries, blah, blah, blah. So she bought into it.
Well, so you're going through this training, you start learning the language. When is it before things start becoming actionable? In other words, it's like, when do you start moving out of the training phase and into the more operational phase? When do they now start giving you tasks that really mean something for the KGB?
Yeah, there was another phase to the training when it. I don't want to get too much into detail because I if I do that, we're going to finish up this conversation in the evening. At one point, they discovered that I had made really good progress in English, and that when that became knowledge, within about 2-3 weeks, I wound up in Moscow because the I was first. I had a trip to Moscow where I had a chat with one American woman who had moved to Moscow, had married probably a KGB agent who operated in the U.S. And a professor who taught English at Moscow University. Obviously, she was KGB, and they decided that I had enough talent with enough training to learn English well enough American English well enough to actually appear in the U.S. as a born American. And I strongly believe that this was a highly exceptional situation because um, I don't know anybody else or know of anybody else who was able to do that because all the illegals were typically smuggled in through other countries, most of them through Brazil, by the way. And that's still, Brazil is still pretty open for those shenanigans. Anyway, so I was moved to Moscow and was trained there for another 2+ years. Most of the training was English. I spent a lot of time reading English, learning more words, interacting with this American woman who I met twice a week, and eventually interacting with the Cohens. You probably know that they were atomic spies, members of the Rosenberg spy ring. And the other part of the training that was very intense was tradecraft, because in Berlin the folks that did tradecraft were second class, so to speak. I was trained by the very best, particularly surveillance detection and keeping up with the other skills I was taught in Berlin, like practice my secret writing and Morse code and making sure that the encryption and decryption algorithm was all good. And so after that 2.5 years, I had a practice trip to Canada. I spent 3 months in Canada. That was a good idea because that gave me an idea what I could expect when I first show up in the United States.
What identity did you go into Canada under? Your real one?
German. I was a German born in Hamburg.
So that was your first cover identity?
Yes. And I had a couple of tasks there, actually. Those days there was the Quebec wanted to split from Canada.
They still want to do that.
Yeah, and then I was to write some report about the political situation. As I'm talking with the Canadians, and I as a tourist, I had no problem interacting with Canadians. Particularly, I spent most of my time in Montreal. There was a reason for that because one of my tasks was to acquire a birth certificate of one Henry Van Randall, who was born someplace in California and passed away at an early age. And I was to send a letter to the local government that kept the records, and I forgot what they were called, but I had an address, and I put a money order in that letter, and I asked him to send me a copy of my birth certificate, signed as Henry Van Randall, and I rented. By the way, I rented a room in a small hotel, so the return address wouldn't have to give the hotel. So it was just the address, and I befriended the folks that were living in that small hotel, and they ran the hotel to intercept that letter when it came to Henry Van Randall as a friend of mine, because I wasn't Henry Van Randall. Anyway, it took for 3 weeks I didn't hear from him. I didn't get a letter. 4 weeks. Eventually, I called them and I yelled at them and I said, "What's the matter with you? Why am I not getting my birth certificate? You got my money." And then within a week, the letter arrived, and I saw it when I went to visit the folks that ran this motel. I was just stopping by practically every day, and I saw that letter, and it says, "Hey, this is for my friend." I took it, went up to my room, and yes, I got it. I opened the letter, and there was a document in there, and it was a copy of a birth certificate, but it was in big red letters, stamped across, "Deceased." Now, that was a disappointment, man. I mean, like my heart.
Especially to Henry, yeah.
Now, this is when I should have left the country, right? Because what actually did happen, but they were too slow about it. This triggered an investigation of the fellow who asked for that birth certificate.
So when you say it triggered the investigation, you're writing to I'm sorry, was it California you were writing to?
California, yes.
So somebody in California then forwarded a concern or whatever, but somebody triggered the investigation out of control.
Yeah, the Royal Mounted Police was informed, and they were slow. So what I did, I knew that I couldn't stay in that hotel, so I moved out. But I still had, a couple of other places to visit, and I did not want to go back to Moscow having failed, even though the failure wasn't my fault, right? But I felt like a failure. And one of the things that that we had planned to do at the end of my stay, I would talk to somebody I was going to go to Windsor, Ontario, and I would talk to some Americans who there was a lot of travel back and forth between and still is between Canada and the United States, and talk as if I were an American. And so my ambition, I really should have been caught. As a matter of fact, on my way out, the airline should have been notified that a certain German came in this country, and and they would have known my name and everything. The airline, it was Swiss Air, should have notified Canadians, and I should have been arrested then. It was a failure of counterintelligence for sure, and I got lucky. But I wound up in Windsor, Ontario, and I went to a bar, and I talked to an American and I talked as if, I said, you know what, the beer that they have here is so much better, and blah, blah, that kind of stuff, indicating that I was actually American, and there was no problem. So I came back to Moscow, at least having succeeded in one way. And then we came up with Plan B. Okay, go back to Berlin. We have to figure out what to do next.
Hey, Jack, real quick, when you went back to Moscow and you hadn't succeeded on the birth certificate, how was that received by them? Did they understand that sometimes just, shit happens, or?
Yeah, they did. They didn't criticize me. So, Plan B was go back to Berlin and read as much as you can about Brazil and study Portuguese. So you know what that meant, going in through Brazil. That wasn't bad because, I still want to go visit Brazil one day. Beautiful country.
I've been down to Brasilia, Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo. But yeah, it's the Portuguese. All I knew were two words: obrigado and de nada. So,
okay.
You're welcome and thank you. Yeah.
I still remember how you started sentences. I am. Eu sou. That nasal sound.
And very Italian sounding too. It's almost, you start listening, it almost sounds Italian. Yeah.
Yeah, and I taught myself Spanish when I was in the U.S., and I realized that Spanish and Portuguese are close to identical, with the exception of some words and the pronunciation. But anyway, and I spent probably it was close to a year in Berlin when they called me back to Moscow, and this is when it got serious because a KGB agent had found the gravestone of Jack Barsky on a cemetery, and he was able to acquire Jack Barsky's birth certificate.
From where?
From like whatever
no, I mean what state or?
Outside of Washington D.C.
Maryland or Virginia?
Maryland, yes, Maryland.
Hey, this is your cover story you've been living under all these years. Okay, where am I from? Oh my God.
No. The cover story, that I don't remember where I was buried. Okay.
Okay. Well,
I was born in Orange, New Jersey. Okay, so that I still remember.
Okay. Well, as Mark Twain said, the reports of my death are greatly exaggerated. So you're alive with us today. So
can I throw something in?
Yeah.
Because it's so funny. I think I hold the world record of having been resurrected 3 times. So Albrecht Dittrich, that's the German name, is listed as having died in East Germany. I'm dead. Jack Barsky obviously died, and then ChatGPT was asked to write a biography of Jack Barsky, and ChatGPT has me dead in 2010. So here I am.
Look at that. ChatGPT can't even get it right. And we're talking with you, by the way, live today. So, folks, it is live. Yep.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know that, but that's all right.
No, I mean, it's not live, like we're not broadcasting, but you're alive today. It's pretty obvious you're alive, so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so, but Plan A came back into my life. And now it was just, I spent about 6 weeks preparing for the entry to the United States. I had to learn, we had to construct the backstory for Jack Barsky. I had to learn backstories for several false identities I would be using on traveling to the United States, because it wasn't a direct flight. It was zigzag through Europe, Mexico, and eventually entrance at Chicago O'Hare. There was a problem I had with a tooth, and that delayed my departure. I was treated. One of my molars was extracted at a KGB clinic, and they didn't have Novocaine. They used something less powerful. And coming out of that one, I was in really bad shape. So I spent. They had me in Armenia for a week with my liaison to just recover. And then one day, and it was in the fall of 1978. I was taken to Sheremetyevo Airport. I had nothing but Western stuff on me, clothes and so forth. I had a shortwave radio in my luggage. It was commercially available. I had Jack Barsky's birth certificate sewn into a secret compartment of one of my a bag a carry-on bag, and I had a writing pad that was acquired at Woolworths that had the first 10 pages were impregnated with some trace of a chemical that was to be used for secret writing. And the most important thing, I had so much information in my head. We're talking about, the route that I was to take, the people that I was going to meet, where I would exchange one false passport for another. The backstory of Jack Barsky, that was pretty complex and long. The communication plan, which consisted of several pages of disconnected facts like frequencies, meeting places, meeting protocols, at least one dead drop site, and on and on and on. And they offered me to take that with me in writing, and I declined, because in those days, and it's unfortunately that I don't have this anymore, my memory was perfect. Mm-hmm. So all of that was in my head, and I retained it all. So there's again proof of why they thought I would actually be successful. And so whoever did the recruiting, and it was Herman, and pretty much Herman and then Nikolai, that determined I had what it took. And by the way, I need to volunteer something, and that may be a big surprise even to you guys. I never met one person who was a KGB psychologist. I never got a psychological test. The only thing, nobody ever really taught me people skills. The only thing that I got to read with regard to people skills was Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of an afterthought. Again, they unfortunately, we're going to have to stop here. There's some idiot who's running around with a leaf blower to clean the hallway when there's nothing to be blown away. So it's going to take about like 2-3 minutes, because you might be picking up that noise. I do, and it bothers me.
Well, you folks might have noticed just a little bit of a gap there. It was the old leaf blower ploy. I'm thinking of Inspector Clouseau, and all the different ploys. I got to tell you, though, Jack, it's funny because one of Steve's friends, actually is his partner, who got shot during an operation that they were doing, Kevin Stevens. Steve, what did we try like 3 times to record him, and the guy kept cutting the lawn? Finally, we just said, screw it. We finally ended up having to do the recording, because every time we set it up, the guy with the lawnmower would be right outside.
He'd hit it again.
Yep. It's like somebody was tapping our communications, listening in on us.
In my case, it's Russian interference, but because they're so incompetent these days, they're not doing a really good job with it.
Not what they used to be. So, but you were talking about psych evals, no psych evals. So, how did they? Was it just up to the case officer then, or just up to your handler?
Yeah, exactly. There was just really nobody else.
Hey players, that is the end of part 1. Part 2 comes out, as always, on Tuesday. In the meantime, go check us out at Game of Crimes on Twitter, at Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. Also, go check out our website, gameofcrimespodcast.com. We've got a lot more information there, including our book list. Any book written by our guests will be listed there. In the meantime, go check us out also, patreon.com/Game of Crimes. It's where we put a lot more content you won't hear on our regular podcast. We go into a lot more topics, and folks, it is a lot of fun. So go check us out, patreon.com/Game of Crimes. In the meantime, everybody stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow for part 2.